everyone, welcome to today's webinar, SDL Tridion Sites 9 Technical Webinar. My name is Christina and I will be your host today. Before the webinar, I have a few housekeeping items to cover about this webinar. First, today's webinar will be available on demand after live session through the same link you are using right now, and the recording will be shared shortly after the webinar. Second, please feel free to send questions in the Q&A box. We will be answering your question at the end of the session. If you don't get answered during the webinar, we will follow up afterwards. Now, I will hand it over to Raymond to begin the presentation.
Thanks, Christina. Hi, everyone, and welcome to this webinar, which is about the new Tridion DX approach to personalization. This is a series of webinars, and today's sessions we really are going to focus on two things. First thing is the prescriptive part, which everyone here probably knows as SmartTarget or experience optimization, and the second part will be more about the adaptive new parts that we envision to build. So this webinar is part of a series about all the new and shiny things that will come out in Tridion Sites 9 and beyond. And as part of it, basically, we have beefed up the community site at community.sdl.com/sites events, where you can basically participate in the conversation about Tridion DX, Tridion Docs, Tridion Sites, and you can also watch these webinars, which will be recorded back as well in your own time. So it's great. So as for today, the agenda will roughly look like the following. First, I'd like to sort of set the baseline about what we think is personalization today as a baseline to have in the back of your minds, mainly to give a starting point for where you want to go. And then we'd like to tell you where we are today, and also what changes we have done already over the past months in prescriptive personalization. After which I'll hopefully give a short demo, which will probably work, but you never know, right? And after that, there is quite a big part on where we would like to go and sort of give a bit of the vision on adaptive personalization, and that's the idea is already pretty thought out, but we are at the stage where we would like to get your feedback as well, because that's of course extremely important in order to for you guys to buy into this, basically. So starting with a bit of a definition on personalization. It's very abstract, but it sort of it captures it, I think. So basically, personalization is the method for displaying targeted, relevant content to your users visiting your digital touchpoints. And with digital touchpoints, I not only mean websites, but also mobile apps, in-flight displays, and all of these other channels. And that's based on the characteristics, behavior, and context of that user. So it's quite a mouthful, but I think that today in 2018, everyone, every large organization, every organization connecting and communicating with the outside world is looking for a solution to this. So here, Tridion can definitely play a role. Just to indicate how important that is today. This year and last year, there have been quite a few surveys on the state of personalization, what people think of it, what they feel they miss, and how important it is, basically on the bottom line. So just a few random numbers, basically, but everyone, or all these people who were surveyed, 68% is hinting that personalization is a top business priority. And for me, more interesting was that all the people who were surveyed said, okay, personalization is the most important thing, but on the second place is the focus on data. And I think that you can't see personalization without data. And everyone here probably knows that the focus on data, GDPR, big data, and all of these things, that's pretty big. And at the same time, 53% of people or organizations feel that they lack the right technology to properly personalize end-to-end experience across the entire content lifecycle. And I think it's becoming more important because of the fact that research firms like Gartner say, okay, those who have invested in all sorts of types of personalization will probably outdo companies that have not by around 20%, which is sort of like a fifth of your revenue, which makes it quite a big and important thing. And one of the reasons that it's so hard to do is that many of the organizations wanting to implement end-to-end personalization have also got these complex enterprise landscapes, and it's pretty hard to get all that to work together and basically duct tape stuff together to have an end-to-end personalized experience. So if you look at this diagram, and don't read all boxes please because it's way too much, but if you want to have a modern enterprise landscape, which is the view of the CIO, thinking, okay, I've got all these systems, all these components, all these different tools to deliver on that personalization promise. Now it means that it's huge, and if you look at where a platform like Tridion fits in, if that works, yeah, this is only actually a really small part of that, and that has consequences for how we, in the Tridion world or in the Tridion product, actually deal with personalization. So imagine we have a scenario whereby Tridion manages and therefore also owns the marketing content. And if you look at this landscape, you can ask yourself, okay, how should it integrate with personalization capability? Should we actually do something out of the box, or should we purely be a best-of-breed integrator? Because other systems, they own all kinds of other data and processes in various stages in the content lifecycle. So if you think about things like segmentation, product information, or customer information, who is owning the glass, and all kinds of things like digital assets and other data, then you would say, okay, we need to primarily be able to integrate. However, one nice thing about Tridion is that it owns the content if you have it implemented in your enterprise landscape. So that means that we can already out of the box do all kinds of interesting things with that content. And that is something that we definitely want to keep in the product in such a way that we can do all kinds of basic, however important, personalization scenarios with. So if you look at where we are today, we basically have an add-on on the Tridion core product, which is called Experience Optimization, in short XO. And what it basically is that it's a native editorial interface in the Tridion Content Manager Explorer or in the Tridion CM, with which you can configure promotional content, therefore personalized content, and select the content items which you want to show whenever that personalized content should show, and it stores that configuration in a platform called Fredhopper. And Fredhopper is in essence quite a sophisticated e-commerce engine for which we use about only 10% of the functionality from. So and what can we currently do with this XO add-on, or with XO? We can basically do prescriptive personalization, and that basically means that we can show target content fragments published from Tridion based on triggers, target queries, which may be segments, or they can be something else. And there is support for A/B testing, which in XO parlance is called experiments. And while this all works very nicely, it's also pretty complicated, and that goes on multiple levels. I think everyone who has implemented or set up the current XO will probably agree that the whole end-to-end setup, setting up Fredhopper, configuring SmartTarget, doing all the development work to get promotions out, it's all pretty complicated. And if you look at the underlying technology, we felt it was in need of a bit of modernization. And for those of you who don't know this, the way prescriptive personalization works is that you basically in your Tridion CME you create an item which we call promotions, and in each promotion we can say, okay, where do we want to trigger this promotion? So in which Tridion publication, in which page region do you want to trigger it? When do you want to trigger it? So for instance, if the date of today is the 9th of October 2014, which is in the past, but it's fine, it's just an example slide, then show the content that is in this Tridion folder, and only that. So that's basically how a content editor configures when this targeted content or this personalized content should be shown on the website. So that means that in sort of more general or generic personalization parlance, this is what we call prescriptive personalization. And specifically, we can do segmentation, or we can use the principle of segmentation to show targeted content for each segment on your website. And that's all native based through Tridion. So what that means is, in this example on this slide, we have a example website for airlines, which on the left side shows generic content. Whereas if a user would come to that site, he or she may be logged in. He or she may have a cookie set where the value is segment is exec. And at that time, so basically when you render this page, you would basically say, okay, change the bottom 3 boxes of this page to show more targeted content specific for the segment that user is in. It's also important to realize is what SmartTarget or XO is not. So I was talking about these segments earlier, and while we can use the segment IDs or the segment names themselves, SmartTarget is not a segmentation engine, nor will it ever be. A segmentation engine basically works on all kinds of gathered data, or for instance customer data through a CRM, or maybe your e-commerce system, which you tie together and say, okay, which users are users who spent between 50 and 100 euros in the last month. And if it's a big group, then you would create a segment out of it. And that process and those algorithms are really complex. And that's basically something that we will never build in XO or SmartTarget. Similarly, XO is not a search engine. And historically, and actually at this point in time, because we use Fredhopper, there is some search capability exposed in the SmartTarget APIs. However, that would only trigger or work on the set of content which is published into Fredhopper, and never the entire set of content that you've published live. So SmartTarget is not a search engine, and it will never become a search engine either, because the idea is that we are going to build native search next to for instance, the SFRT integrations or whatever you have today, which can actually operate on the full published set of content. It's also not an adaptive personalization engine yet. This is something that we envisage to actually build into XO, and more about that in the second part of this webinar. So I hope I sort of explained where we are today, and let's have a look as to where we want to basically go to. We sort of internally baptized XO as, or the new XO as, putting the new XO on steroids. And concretely, that means for us that we not only want to do prescriptive personalization, but we also want to bring in basic adaptive personalization and the ability to integrate seamlessly, or as seamlessly as possible, I should say, with mature adaptive personalization systems that are out there in the world, which includes the full editorial integration. And I'll explain how that should work, or I'll try to explain the ideas later on. And with the new sort of conversions of Tridion Docs and Tridion Sites, so Tridion DX, we found that there are quite a few use cases actually where we should actually have something like personalization, be that adaptive or prescriptive, in the Docs side of things. So we are very much looking into bringing EXO also into the Docs side of the house, if I can put it like that. The other thing that we pretty much need is, modern cloud scalability. So we'd like to be able to use the sort of new cloud paradigms whereby you can auto scale up and down. You can seamlessly add all kinds of new functionality and servers in the Tridion stack, or to use for personalization. We are also looking into bringing a lot more real-timeness into the mainly front-end stacks in order to be able to provide adaptive personalization. And I think that SDL is quite a big player on the machine learning part for the language side of SDL, and we can definitely use some of their knowledge, expertise, but maybe also code to start using that in the personalization area. And at the same time, we really want to stay and be a best-of-breed player with personalization systems. So the first thing that we did already is that we make the decision to remove Fredhopper out of the equation. That had a couple of reasons. Basically, we were tied in with Fredhopper, and the SmartTarget integration on top of Fredhopper was working well, except that we actually, I think, didn't use Fredhopper in the way it should be used, because in essence what SmartTarget is you have data that you publish from Tridion. You have some quite basic rules on those published set of data, and on the query side you basically query on a set of criteria in order to get the right personalized content out. So we were thinking, if we have the idea that we need to be cloud ready, if we have the idea that we need to be a lot more flexible within the use case of personalization, it's better to move away from Fredhopper and use something like Elasticsearch as a replacement in order to fulfill our requirements. So that's basically what we did, and the result is at this point in time that we are keeping all the components that are actually connecting to Elasticsearch. So in essence, we use Fredhopper as a storage layer, and we basically replaced that storage layer with a new storage layer. So just a summary of the reasons to do this replacements. As I said, we use only 10% of Fredhopper's functionality. I think that Elasticsearch is much better scalable, and we also have the freedom, basically, refine the data models that we actually use, and instead of trying to transform our own data models into the Fredhopper data model, then that gives a lot of more flexibility in case you want to extend or we want to make changes to our SmartTarget data models. At the same time, we are building search natively in Tridion DX, so that means Docs and Sites. So if you put next to it a personalization offering, it would make sense architecturally to also do that on Elasticsearch. But as I said in my previous slide, this is really is a step zero, because once this is all out the door, then we can really start doing all the cool stuff. So at this point in time, we have sort of finished the rework. We basically aim to release that when Size 9 comes out. And the nice thing, or at least I like it, that the nice thing is that the public SmartTarget API is fully backward compatible. So that means that you can still do a CM first upgrade, or you can do all at once, or you could probably even do a CD upgrade, although I'm not sure if that's going to be supported. But it gives a lot of flexibility. So then the big question becomes, obviously, how are we ever going to get the data out of Fredhopper and into Elasticsearch? So while thinking about that, we basically said, okay, let's write a migration tool which does that for you. And yeah, one other important thing to note, we deprecated and or removed two features of which we think are not widely used. So as I said, that search functionality that we offered through the API to search through the XO / SmartTarget API into Fredhopper, that's going to be dropped. And the replacement for it is that you will be able to use the search API that is already there in Tridion docs. When that's going to be brought into Tridion Sites 9, that's an open question. The idea is now that it's going to be there in 9.1 or maybe a bit later. But it's a much more advanced and robust set of search capabilities. So that's a good replacement. And then the second thing that we decided to deprecate is the navigation feature, which I think no one ever uses because it's much easier done by using the standard broker APIs, or maybe by using a new and exciting content API, which will hopefully also come out in Tridion Sites 9. So yeah, so let's do a bit of a demo, because all that talk makes everyone sleepy. So I will demo how to migrate Fredhopper data out of Fredhopper and into Elasticsearch. So I'm going to switch to this screen share thing, and I hope it works. Can you see the screen? No? Yeah. I have a really experienced assistant next to me. Yes, are we there? Good. So if everything is working okay, you see now a SmartTarget installation on screen. Basically, you see a bunch of promotions, quite a few actually. And in this instance, so CD environment, they are basically loaded into Fredhopper. And if I look on the server, then you see here a Fredhopper instance which has roughly 560 items published into it, as well as quite a number of promotions. And we're now going to attempt to migrate promotions, content fragments, so items, experiments, and everything else that you need. So that's including your region configuration and the trigger types. We're going to try to import it into CD environment 2. And as you can see here, there's no items in this view. And just to make sure that I'm not cheating, I'm going to press the refresh button, and hopefully I still have an internet connection. Yeah, and there are still no items in this view. So we wrote this tool, and that tool is a simple command line tool. It's written in Java, and you basically can run a java-jar command with this jar, and then say, okay, these are my, this is my configuration, and let's do an export out of Fredhopper and see what happens. So what will happen is that once I press enter, let's do it now because it takes quite a while actually. It will call a Fredhopper custom extension, and it will extract all data which is relevant to SmartTarget onto your file system, and then structure it basically according to the SmartTarget items that we have. So we have items, promotions, regions, and trigger types, and experiments are sort of an extension of promotions. So that's basically where these things are as well. And everything's basically just exported as JSON, because that makes it really interesting or really easy actually to import stuff into Elasticsearch. So let's do that. And the only thing I have to do is change export for import. And if I import this, then you see it's running. And it takes a bit because we have loads of promotions, so that might give me some time to look into the Elasticsearch indexes. Still nothing there. Content fragments are already there. And yeah, maybe it's nice to see also we decided to use multiple indexes for all the different SmartTarget types. And that's mainly because by doing it like this, we can scale out Elasticsearch in a really flexible way. So we could say, okay, let's put promotions on a different cluster than, for instance, the content fragments, or in SmartTarget where it's the items, because maybe there will be a gazillion queries for promotions. So it's good to maybe serve that from a different cluster. Let's see if that import is already done. That looks done with no errors, so that's great. Let's see if we have some promotions already. Yeah, so here you see we've got 44 promotions, and this thing is still formatting. So that means that, yeah, we have content fragments, and you will notice that we had 513 items in Fredhopper, and of which 467 have been imported into Elasticsearch. And that's mainly because there is a lot of other stuff going on in Fredhopper which we don't import. So as the ultimate test, this is a simple JSP page with the same layout as we, I think, have been using for the past 15 years in Tridion. But it's still very effective, so that's great. But as you see here, this page connects to Elasticsearch, and there is no promotional content like experiments or otherwise on this page. But if I now click refresh, then you see that it actually shows items which are now published into or imported actually into Elasticsearch. At the same time, there is also a experiment going on, and that's this block. So that basically means that, yeah, you can export everything that you've put into Fredhopper, which is relevant to SmartTarget, into Elasticsearch. And the nice thing about this is that the Java APIs as well as the .NET APIs, you don't have to change a single line of code if you use the official APIs in order to get this out of Elasticsearch. So I think that's quite flexible. So going back to the presentation, so I think I'd like to think that we've done quite a bit of work on this already, and I think the basic layers and the basic architecture is now pretty solid. However, we would like to do a bit more, which also ties into sort of the future vision of ECL, the data integration services. So basically, it would be nice to do known personalization, which means that you know, a user logs into a site through, for instance, Salesforce, and we can somehow integrate the data coming from Salesforce with our own SmartTarget APIs through the ambient data framework, or maybe through ECL 3.3. And this personalization capability is also meant to be built or changed or built inside Tridion Docs. And the Tridion Docs and Tridion Sites actually share the same delivery platform these days, the unified delivery platform. So on that side, already both sets of published content from both Docs and Sites are able to use this. However, what's not there yet in docs is the configuration part in the UI. And there are some minor UI improvements to do, and it would also be great if we could, in an automated way or in an easier way, import things like segments and triggers instead of having to do it manually. And with the rework to Elasticsearch, that's already gotten a bit easier, because whereas in the current SmartTarget implementation, you have to do all the configuration on triggers and regions in files on a file system, that's all now stored in Elasticsearch. There's only one central place where you have to do that. So that's, I think, a big win already as well. So now that we've got this foundation, we can start to think on the future. And for us, that future is what we call, or what everyone calls actually, adaptive personalization. And again, sort of a baseline definition. This is basically different from prescriptive personalization because it's more the ability to deliver personalized content and recommendations in near real time and with real-time data. But what's also quite an important aspect to it is that it can be self-learning. And yeah, how does it differ in reality from the prescriptive personalization part? So as we've seen before, the prescriptive personalization part is really rule-based. So you have to pre-configure rules, and based on those pre-configured rules, you have to tag content, which is then shown if that rule is triggered in your website. Whereas adaptive personalization can actually do the same, but it's much more meant to in real time assemble some content fragment on your website based on who and where people are, and why and how they access the content, on which device that is, and also to have a look around you as to what other published data is present to predict what these users want to see. And prediction is quite an important word in the adaptive personalization world. So if we take it into account, there is a very nice definition on Kentigo, but the highlight of it is that we believe that adaptive personalization is a type of personalization that predicts content and experience a customer is looking for. And the other big difference with prescriptive is that adaptive personalization can be or should be able to be continually applied on your business rules and your data as that data is being processed and coming in. So that's not only true for published content, but also, for instance, for data that you track from your website, and also maybe data that you want to mash up coming from a CRM system or an e-commerce system. And the second big part on this is that the predefined set of rules is basically thrown out the door, and you actually develop a set of rules or algorithms that you want to use to be able to automatically select content based on automatically generated, for instance, segments or other data points. It's quite a mouthful. So therefore I made a picture. The self-learning aspect of this is that there's a lot of data that you can use, and if you look in the middle, it's like it's a gambling machine, or well, it's actually a gambling machine, but every gambling machine has got some predefined algorithms by which the bank almost always wins. It's an algorithm called Gambler's Ruin. With that aside, what you can do, for instance, is you can take all kinds of contextual data with session profile data and custom profile data, store that somewhere in a more or less anonymous way, and then make sensible predictions based on that data. And this whole algorithm, sorry, I'm going to go one slide back. this whole algorithm. There are huge players in the market these days which do this natively. Tridion doesn't. However, we would like to take some of this capability or some of these algorithms into the native Tridion stack. And that means that there are, in essence, two technical approaches to use Tridion in an adaptive personalization way. And both methods are equally important. And this is also something that we have the vision of to build all of this in. So the first approach is that we can integrate really well with third-party digital marketing platforms for the sole reason that digital marketing platforms out there today are really mature actually, and we would be foolish to not be able to make use of those. However, there's one big caveat there, and that is that if Tridion owns the content and those DMPs own the personalization rules, it would be very nice to be able to marry those two together in such a way that, for instance, you could select the Tridion published content into a DMP, but then have the rules configuration and the segmentation configuration in that DMP. And the other sort of approach is that we build some of this into the stack, into mainly the unified delivery platform stack. And even though it might sound a bit strange, there is quite a use case for it, because if customers start out with Tridion and if they want to see what personalization can do for them, it already makes sense, I think, from a Tridion point of view, to have the ability to have customers start with relatively simple adaptive personalization. At the same time, because Tridion owns the content, you can already do all kinds of cool things with published content, and that means that if you look at the current Tridion customers today, it might already be that quite a lot of their use cases are already covered with this native approach. That's not to say that we should not aim for both. And finally, I think that one big part of the vision is that we finally get those feedback loops back into the UI in order to be able to give an online marketer or an editor the feedback loop that they need. So content metrics are quite important in this, regardless of whether you use native capability or whether you go for the integrated option. And they're not mutually exclusive anyway, so that's quite a thing to do, right? What do we mean with native adaptive personalization? There are two main things that we are focusing on at the moment. Because we have published content, we can already do two things, and we should be able to predict and recommend which content would a user would be interested in next. And the second example is that because we have published content and we use, for instance, Elasticsearch, we can actually use Elasticsearch native algorithms to find a similarity in the content. And that's not only on a textual level, but it's also on the level of, for instance, publications, taxonomies, or hierarchies and structures of your website. So you can imagine that we basically build a tracker which tracks all the clicks in your Tridion website, which is then fed back into a different Elasticsearch index. And on that index, rules are being run, so that at some point your site builds up the data points to make smart predictions on what a other user would probably want to see as well. But before going to the example, basically, yeah, why would we bring this in the Tridion stack? I think that the first and second reasons are very important. So basically, no integration required. That makes it much easier to implement Tridion, put it into your enterprise landscape, test if stuff works, and after that, if it works, maybe do some more complex personalization algorithms. What I also find important is the single editorial view and the use of UDP APIs. So it doesn't mean that you need to have all kinds of APIs and tie all kinds of data together. But if you could just use the native APIs that Tridion offers, so that makes it quite powerful actually. And so what I think you can already do with a native adaptive offering, because we have the content and we can track which content is clicked, we can say, okay, we have quite a big set of tracked users which bought T-shirts with a funny opinion, and 70% of them also bought fashionable combat boots. So if you run that algorithm, any other user who might be in the same segment as that big group of users who also buys a T-shirt, you can now say, okay, people like you also bought this and this and this. And that's something I think you can already do with just a Tridion stack and this new adaptive personalization. But equally important, is the best of breed adaptive personalization. Basically, what we see today is that many platforms bring in some content management capability, which of course is in effect duplicating maybe your content, and those have to go into different systems, and that's always complicated, and usually always comes down to the fact that at some point in time no one knows exactly which content store is the primary content store and where should be added what. So in order to prevent that, it should be possible to basically simply pick and choose content published from Tridion. And once you have that, then you can basically have the best of both worlds, right? So you can basically say, okay, all these complex rules that a mature adaptive personalization platform is really good in, let's just use that, but let's let them use our content in a seamless way. And if you integrate, any integration is always more complex than not, but at the same time, the complexity of CM and the delivery of CM, as well as the complexity of personalization and the delivery of personalized content through your systems, they're individually already so complex that I think that what it will come down to is that many enterprise-level customers who have these kinds of wishes will always go for this integration option. So when would you use this kind of approach? So say if you want to unlock your enterprise silos and you want to mash up all kinds of data coming from all kinds of different systems, that's something that's nearly always a customization. And I think that adaptive personalization platforms are quite good at aggregating all the data and performing segmentation on it, which is something that we don't want to do in the Tridion stack. But also, if you look at it from a purely personalization perspective, like if you have a huge web shop like Apple or TomTom, and you want to sort of steer people in the funnel, say, okay, we've seen that you looked at this model machine already like 10 times. Let's see if we can push you towards buying something more expensive, right? So those kinds of personalization algorithms are really complex to build, actually, and they also always depend on the huge amount of data in different silos that you already have. So then you would do a best of breed approach, where still Tridion owns the content, but other systems own the personalization rules. So as an example, a simple item recommender, which in theory is really simple, can be very complex if you want to use data not only inside your enterprise landscape, but also track data from for instance, Google Analytics. So the example is lead the current user to a funnel of high-end products based on popularity tracked by an analytics engine. For logged-in users coming from a CRM system, who according to your e-commerce system has spent more than 25 euros in the last month. Well, good luck building that. But there we say, okay, Tridion should at least play very nice with other systems and not be the blocking factor in building these kinds of personalization scenarios. And yeah, so if you combine the both, then I think it's a nice vision to have, and it's definitely something that we are striving to build. So that's it from my side. I think it was a lot of text, but I hope you like it. So let's go to a couple of questions maybe. Oh, there hasn't been any question asked. So I think.
Okay, thank you for presenting, Raymond.
Yeah.
We are now going to open it up the Q&A session. So if you have any questions regarding today's session, please enter your question into the Q&A box. It seems there's no questions. Okay. As I earlier said, this webinar will be available on demand after the live session through the same link you are using right now. And also recording will be shared shortly after the webinar. Okay, before we finish, we've got one question. The question is, will content experiments continue to work with Elastic?
Yes, so every bit of functionality apart from the mentioned search and navigation in XO, that will all work. So content experiments at the moment work with the analytics provider for Google Analytics. So that will be working as is today. Does that answer the question?
Okay. Yeah, we hope it answers to your question. The next question is Tridion 9. Is there any GUI improvements related to XO?
Well, we have defined a lot of UI improvements in the XO UI. Amongst which simple things like having a simple paginated list of promotions, for instance. That work will start, but we will not get it ready for the Stats 9 release. However, it is aimed for the 9.1 release. So that means that if you look at the GUI that you just saw in the demo, the 8.5 UI, that's the same. That's going to be the same as for the 9.0 UI.
Okay, thank you. Okay, if you have any other questions, please contact our speaker directly, and we will be answering the question afterwards this webinar. Okay, thank you for presenting Raymond today. Thank you to everyone for attending today's webinar. You will be receiving a recording file shortly, and we hope it is useful and informative to you. Have a great rest of the day. Thank you.